Yesterday, Speaker Johnson laid out plans to weaponize the House's oversight powers to gin up retaliatory investigations against Democrats and President Biden as sort of a Republican response to Trump's conviction by a jury of his peers in New York City. And you can bet a good chunk of those investigations will probably come out of the House's Republican-led Committee on the Weaponization of the Federal Government. Again, every Republican allegation here is actually a confession. But what makes all of this so much worse is that these revenge fantasies aren't just coming from Speaker Johnson and his fellow Republicans in the wackadoo House conference. This is where the whole party is. The GOP is the party of vengeance. Joining me now is Massachusetts Senator, Democrat Elizabeth Warren. Senator Warren, thank you so much for being here. You know, I remember a time when Marco Rubio, your colleague in the Senate, had at least a residence on Earth One, where facts are facts and reality is reality. I have to get your thoughts on his statement, his tweet today, saying our current president is a demented man propped up by wicked and deranged people willing to destroy our country to remain in power. It's time to fight fire with fire. Your thoughts, Senator?
You know, this revenge fantasy is truly alarming. I understand that these are people who have taken their oath of loyalty to Donald Trump, not to the Constitution, not to the people of the United States of America, but to this one man. And they suck up, they do whatever it is that he wants them to do. But the direction that this has now gone, look, we all understand using our court system for retribution is wrong. And there is absolutely zero evidence that the 34 felony convictions against Donald Trump had anything to do with political retribution. And yet the Republicans in this fevered moment have decided that the only way they can explain that their candidate is a convicted felon. Can I say that again? A convicted felon who has said he wants to be dictator on day one, that the only way they can explain that is to head off into, they're planning to do retribution, and somehow they think that will spill backwards into what happened in the courts in New York. None of this makes any sense. It doesn't add up except to say it's about tearing down our government. It's about tearing down our institutions. And I believe the reason they want to do that is they don't want a government that functions. We're trying to show that we can actually make government work for people. We can actually make government be an instrument of roads and bridges and things that work better for the rest of America. We can cancel student loan debt and get $35 insulin, the kinds of things that Joe Biden has been doing. What these Republicans want is they just want to use government for power, for Donald Trump and for themselves. And that is truly a threat to our democracy.
Yeah, I'd love to follow up a little bit more on that, because now Scott Perry and Ronnie Jackson are going to be sitting on a House committee that oversees spy agencies, that has access to sensitive and classified information. I mean, as a prominent Democrat, does that scare you?
Yeah. It really does. I am alarmed by every step they're taking and by the fact that people who are less and less attached to reality are moving into ever more powerful positions in the House of Representatives. And I worry that we're getting some evidence that the Senate doesn't, on the Republican side, doesn't look like it's far behind. This is an alarming moment. 5 months from today, we'll have an election. And when people say democracy is on the ballot, this is a big part of what we're talking about. Do you believe in government? Do you try to support government? Do you make your loyalty to the Constitution and the people of the United States? Or is it all about one man? And however much you have to distort the facts, however much you have to lie, however much you have to engage in ugly and mean retribution fantasies, you'll do it if it satisfies that one man. That's the choice in front of us. And I got to say, I'm glad I'm on the Democratic side. I'm with Joe Biden, who is at heart a decent and good man who wants government to work for people.
I have to ask you, because as we talk about Republican revenge fantasies, Senator Katie Britt of Alabama, another colleague in the Senate, called Democratic efforts to pass protection for contraception today on the Senate floor part of a summer of scare tactics. First, if you could respond to the notion that protecting contraception is a partisan scare tactic.
Okay, so let's just be really clear. What she's really saying is that if we talk about what the Republicans are threatening to do, we really will scare America. And I think that's right. Because look at it this way. What have the Republicans done so far? Well, they told us 2.5 years ago, no, nobody was going to touch Roe versus Wade, right? And then Donald Trump gets this extremist Supreme Court in place, and the first chance they get, they pitch out Roe versus Wade. They don't take a little bite out of it. They don't say, yeah, but on the other hand, they just throw the whole thing out. And while they're throwing it out, Clarence Thomas says, you know what, as long as we're throwing out Roe, let's take a look at throwing out Griswold, which 10 years earlier had protected access to contraception. In addition to that, the Speaker of the House and a majority of Republicans in the House of Representatives are co-sponsors on a bill about life begins at conception that would actually make illegal certain forms of contraception, IUDs, Plan B. In addition to that, there are extremist groups out there that are aggressively lobbying to take away access to contraception. And then we've got Donald Trump himself, who just 2 weeks ago said, yeah, that he was going to take a look at putting restrictions on contraception. And then, as if all that were not enough, understand that today in the United States Senate, all but 2 Republicans, when given a chance to vote on what about a federal law to protect access to contraception, that's all the bill really said, only 2 Republicans said, yeah, I'll support that. The rest of them either voted no or ran for the hills so that they wouldn't have to say in public how they feel about taking away access to contraception. You better believe that Americans should be scared about what Republicans want to do, because they're coming after abortion everywhere in this country. They're coming after IVF in this country, and they're coming after contraception, not just in red states, but nationally. Red states, blue states, purple states, everywhere. It's an extremist agenda, and America should be alarmed.
Donald Trump may have lost his New York City criminal case, but the delays in his criminal prosecutions in Florida and Georgia are dealing him a pretty winning hand. Today in Georgia, the state's Court of Appeals put the election conspiracy prosecution against Trump on hold until at least October, when the court takes up Trump's motion to disqualify Fulton County DA Fani Willis. And then down in Florida, in Trump's federal criminal prosecution over his handling of classified documents, Judge Aileen Cannon continues to entertain a very long list of specious arguments to dismiss this case entirely. In the next hearing later this month, Trump's attorneys will argue that Jack Smith's appointment as special counsel was unconstitutional. Judge Cannon is not only taking valuable court time to hear a matter that's already been adjudicated in other courts, she's also taking the remarkable step of allowing lawyers who are not part of the case to come to court and join in on the oral arguments. Joining me now to help understand what is happening here, my good friend Joyce Vance, former U.S. Attorney for the Northern District of Alabama and co-host of the Sisters-in-Law podcast. Joyce, Mary McCord was on Chris Hayes' show earlier and said she had never in her career seen something like what Judge Cannon is doing right now, inviting effectively guest conservative lawyers to come to the court and sing their song. How unusual is this in your estimation?
Right. So Mary and I talked about this earlier today, and we are hard-pressed to think of any situation where a district court judge, a trial court judge, not only entertained these amicus briefs from non-parties, but then permitted them to come into court and argue their case. It's like inviting random folks off the street who don't have a stake in the case to come and express their views. You know, you extremely rarely will see this with a government entity, perhaps the Justice Department in a case between private litigants where the government has a stake in the issues. But this is just a little bit off the wall, to put it politely. And this is a judge who has complained that she can't set a trial date in this case because she has such a backlog of motions. Here she's taking a day just to hear one issue in a motion that could have just as easily been decided after she read the briefs. Trial judges only hear oral argument if there are outstanding issues that they have concerns about after reading the briefs. Here, all of the issues are adequately addressed in the briefs submitted by the parties.
Does it suggest to you that she's looking for a way to dismiss the case? And I know this all seems far-fetched, but everything she's done so far seems far-fetched. I mean, do you think this is her way out of this case?
So I don't think the amicus give her ammunition she doesn't otherwise have. There's a District of Columbia Court of Appeals decision from the Mueller investigation era that says this form of appointing a special counsel is constitutional. End of story. The Court of Appeals reached that decision unanimously. They didn't struggle in their opinion. But it's fair for Judge Cannon, who's in a different circuit, the 11th Circuit, that hasn't decided that issue, to make her own independent decision. That doesn't require a couple of days of hearings that include this sort of unusual amicus proceeding in order to get there. And here's the reality, by the way. If she dismisses the case on this basis, Jack Smith will go straight to the 11th Circuit. I bet you he already has the notice of appeal sitting on his desk just in case she rules that way, so he can jump onto it. I don't think it will take the Court of Appeals in Atlanta very long to reverse her if she rules that way.
Yeah, I would assume he's prepared given her track record thus far. Speaking of Court of Appeals, I got to ask your opinion of what's happening down in Georgia. I mean, to some degree, it's not that surprising that the Court of Appeals would say, let's work out this other issue and put the rest of the case on hold. But I do wonder, you know, your assessment about how imperiled Fani Willis is in terms of prosecuting this case and taking it to trial.
You know, I think it's hard to say. Judge McAfee wrote a detailed and serious opinion based on days' worth of taking evidence. He may well be affirmed ultimately by the courts of appeals in Georgia. And of course, again, the issue, as it is in southern Florida, is delay, how much time it takes before we get to a point where this case can move forward, whether it's with Fani Willis at the helm or someone else.
Do you have a sense, Joyce, of, you know, when we talk about any of these cases getting back on track, do you have any assessment? What are you most hopeful about? There are three big ones that are effectively sort of in various states of limbo. Do you have a lead horse, if any?
So hopeful is a little bit of a tough word here. I think, you know, the case that we would all like to see tried is the case about January 6th, the case that impacts each of our rights as Americans and whether or not a former president tried to deny our right to cast a vote. And that case could get on track depending on what the Supreme Court does and how quickly they do it. But of course, the Florida case, the Southern District of Florida case, is extraordinarily serious because it involves how a candidate for the presidency mishandled classified information in some potentially catastrophic ways. I think it's extremely unlikely that we'll see a trial in that case before the end of the year. But, you know, the interesting thing is we all, I think, buy into the Trump narrative, right, that these cases won't get to trial, that it's too late, forget it, everything is about what voters do. And that's very true in a sense. Voters will ultimately make a decision on Trump's fitness to serve. But if Trump is not elected, these cases will go to trial shortly after the first of the year. And that's one way of bringing this situation to a close and seeking justice.
Yes, and that's exactly sort of the intention of my question. We shouldn't dismiss these cases as wiped away in November, because if Joe Biden wins, Donald Trump's going to trial more than once. Today, the Biden administration's executive action to limit the number of U.S. border crossings officially took effect. The order temporarily shuts down most asylum requests at the Mexico border once daily encounters pass a certain threshold. Some of this is similar to actions taken by President Trump. Legal Alert, the deputy director of the ACLU's Immigrant Rights Project, who successfully sued to block some of Trump's policies from taking effect, said in a statement, "It was illegal when Trump did it, and it is no less illegal now." Joining me now is Legal Alert Deputy Director of the ACLU, Immigrants' Rights Project. Lee, it's great to see you. Let me just first, if it was illegal then and illegal now, is the ACLU going to file a lawsuit against the Biden administration?
We are going to sue for sure, and we are just deciding when. The timing is still in the works and exactly where, but that's definitely going to happen.
I want to get your thoughts on the illegality of this, because Donald Trump was on another cable news network this evening speaking with the host about this Biden executive action, and this is what he had to say.
Yesterday, he implemented a new policy. However, it's
meaningless.
2 million illegals a year.
Millions of people are allowed to come in. It's meaningless. It's a joke. Everybody knows it. It has nothing to do with border security.
Okay, so it's meaningless. It's a joke. It has nothing to do with border security. What's your assessment? What's your reaction to that, first of all?
Well, you know, I think we shouldn't be listening to President Trump on immigration. I mean, as you know very well, he's the person who implemented the family separation policy. And, you know, a lot of people talk about the American people want something done on immigration, and we are not disputing that. But I think they want something balanced. They don't want to go back to what Trump did with family separation. Yeah. They want something balanced. What's disappointing and illegal about this new policy of Biden is I think it went too far to one extreme. I mean, if you just take a family who's fleeing persecution because they're Christian or some other religion and they're in grave danger, you would want that family to get screened for asylum. This policy, if they enter in the wrong place, does not allow for that and will send them back to danger. So we need to streamline the asylum process, make it more efficient. But this goes too far by ending screenings for most asylum seekers. I think if the American people knew that no matter how grave danger you're in, and even if it was because of your religion, you still wouldn't be screened if you entered in the wrong place, then I think they would react to it. So I think we need to find some balanced approach. And the reason it's illegal is very clear. Congress has said if you get to U.S. soil, even if you enter legally, you should be screened for asylum. It doesn't mean you get asylum. And the reason is very clear. People can't always get to a port. There's very few spots.
You're talking about the port of entry,
exactly,
right?
Exactly. Sorry. And so the port of entries are far away. You could be traveling with a child. The cartels may push you away from there. And there's very few spots there. So Congress has said for decades, if you get on U.S. soil, we will screen you no matter how you get here. It doesn't mean you get it. And so I think that's where we need to go. The other thing we need to do, frankly, is have more legal pathways. I don't know a single economist, and you've focused on this also, who says we don't need more workers and immigrant workers. That would reduce backlog at the border. Let's have pathways for workers. Let's make the asylum system more efficient. No one's saying we should have year delays. So put asylum officers there. I also think there's too much focus on enforcement. As you've seen from being down at the border, families come over the border, they sit down on the ground over the border, and they wait to apply for asylum. They're not trying to evade law enforcement. So what we need there is more asylum officers to screen them, not to say throw enforcement at it.
The asylum piece is greatly constricted, as you say, because right now, if you come in not at a port of entry, it's not available to you. You're not getting an asylum claim.
Exactly.
Do you think the Biden administration intended on being so retributive towards asylum seekers, or is that just an after effect of just trying to effectively shut down the border?
Yeah, so I would not attribute ill will. And one thing that we are extremely appreciative is not only that President Biden has not done things like family separation, but he hasn't demonized immigrants. He hasn't said, you know, immigrants are bad. And that's what I think the prior administration did. And that causes all that ill will. But I do think this policy is coming about. I mean, he says because Congress didn't do it, and I think there's a lot to be said for it. We need comprehensive immigration reform, and, you know, as he said, Congress has sort of forced his hand. But I think there were other options for him rather than going to this level of we're not even going to screen you for asylum if you come in the wrong place. I think if people are in danger, we need to screen them. No one's saying don't make it more efficient. We need to make it more efficient, but this is too much to say a family fleeing persecution because of their religion, if they don't enter in the right place, they don't know where to enter, we'll just send you right back. And that's really a dangerous proposition.
I mean, Lee, I will say, immigrants are the backbone of our economy. And I do wonder if there's been enough defense of the integral role they play in propping up our country.
Yeah, for sure. And I think, what I always say to people is, think about the immigrant and do they fit the narrative that the Trump administration or President Trump is putting out there, that they're all gang members of national security? They're not. And you know it when you just think about the immigrants I think the polarization has led us away from basic solutions like pathways for workers, more asylum officers to stream the system, and force people's hands into this kind of extreme measure.
Yeah, let's not forget our shared humanity and our shared fates, right? That's part of the American compact.